Give me my phone. I was still on the dining room floor when I said it, one arm locked around my ribs and the other pressed against the cut near my hairline. Every breath felt like something sharp was moving under my skin. Ashley stood a few feet away, pale but defensive. You came at me first. I was walking away. My phone was beside my knee. I reached for it. I'm calling the police. Mom moved before I could unlock the screen. She snatched it straight out of my hand. Absolutely not, she snapped. Don't call the cops, you'll ruin her life. For a second, I just stared at her. I was bleeding. I could barely breathe. And somehow Ashley's future was the emergency. Mom, I think she broke something. She looked at my side, then back at me. It's just a rib, Karen. That was when Dad rushed into the room, looked from me to Ashley, and asked the question that told me exactly whose side he was already on. What did you say to provoke her? Ashley immediately pointed at me. She wouldn't stop. She kept pushing me. That's a lie. I tried to stand, but pain folded me back against the table. I tried to leave. Dad exhaled like I was inconveniencing him. You always have to turn everything into a crisis. I looked at the three of them and suddenly recognized the pattern. Ashley exploded. Ashley apologized. Ashley was protected. And because I was older, quieter, and supposedly more mature, I was expected to absorb whatever damage she caused. Except this time, the damage was visible. Mom still had my phone clenched in her hand. No police, she said. We're handling this as a family. Dad nodded. You fell during an argument. That's all anybody needs to know. Ashley's face changed slightly. She understood what they were doing too. They were already building the story before I had even gotten off the floor. Ashley got emotional. I escalated. I fell. Nobody needed to know anything else. Give me my phone, I said again. Mom held it behind her back. Promise me you're not calling anyone. Something inside me went strangely quiet. I stopped arguing. Using the table for support, I forced myself upright, grabbed my coat and purse, and headed toward the front door. Mom stared after me. Where do you think you're going? I opened the door. To find out whether it's really just a rib. 20 minutes later, I was driving toward the emergency room with shallow breaths and blood drying near my temple. But the pain was no longer the only thing on my mind. My family was already preparing to lie. And for the first time in my life, I was wondering how much evidence I could preserve before they realized I wasn't going to protect Ashley anymore. At the emergency department, the first lie almost came out automatically. The nurse looked at the cut near my hairline, then at the way I was holding my side. What happened? I opened my mouth. For 1 second, I was going to say I slipped. That was what Mom wanted. That was what Dad expected. That was what I had spent years doing, making ugly things sound smaller so nobody else had to deal with the consequences. The nurse waited. I looked down at my hands. My sister shoved me during a fight. Saying it out loud changed something. There was no taking it back now. A few hours later, imaging confirmed what Mom had dismissed so casually. One fractured rib. The doctor treated the cut and explained what symptoms would mean I needed immediate help. Then he asked me again how the injury happened. I gave him the same answer. My sister shoved me. This time, somebody outside my family wrote it down. That mattered more than I understood in the moment. Later, using another device to access my messages, I saw what my family had been sending. Mom, please tell the hospital you slipped. Dad, Ashley has applications pending. One stupid family fight cannot follow her forever. Then Ashley. I'm sorry, but you grabbed me too, so don't act innocent. I stared at that one. Before the fight, Ashley had also sent me angry texts warning me not to push her during our argument. I started taking screenshots. Every message. Every timestamp. Every demand. Then Mom called. For one ridiculous second, I thought maybe she was going to ask how badly I was hurt. Instead, her first question was, "What exactly did you tell them?" I looked at her message asking me to lie. Then I saved the entire conversation and forwarded it to an email account my family had no access to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up Ashley's mess. I was preserving it. By the next morning, Mom had already gotten ahead of me. My phone was finally back in my possession, but when I opened the family group chat, I found dozens of messages waiting. My aunt had written, "Karen, seriously, you're threatening Ashley's future over a fight between sisters." Another relative added, "Ashley said you went after her first." I sat upright despite the pain in my ribs. They weren't just asking me to stay quiet anymore. They were telling everyone their version before I could tell mine. Then Mom posted, "Both girls lost their tempers. We are handling this privately. Please stop making it bigger than it was." I read that twice. Both girls. As if we had walked away with matching injuries. I typed one response. "I have a medically diagnosed fractured rib. I will not discuss an active matter through family gossip." Then I put my phone down. The chat went quiet. Minutes later, a private message arrived from my cousin. "Wait, fractured. Your mom said you were barely hurt." That was when I understood exactly what Mom had done. She hadn't simply asked everyone to respect our privacy. She had minimized my injury so that if I refused to protect Ashley, I would look vindictive. I wasn't going to fight that battle in a group chat. I contacted the appropriate authorities and gave the same account I had given at the hospital. I told the truth. When I was asked about messages connected to the incident, I provided the threatening texts from Ashley and the messages from my parents pressuring me to call the injury an accident. Not long afterward, Ashley called. I answered. "Do you understand what you've done to me?" she screamed. I almost laughed from disbelief. "What I've done to you? You reported me. Do you understand what you did to me?" Silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then Ashley lowered her voice. "Karen, just fix it." "No. You always forgive things." "Not this." Another silence. Then she said the one sentence that confirmed this wasn't just panic. "They had been counting on me from the beginning. Mom said you would eventually change your story." 3 days later, someone started pounding on my apartment door. "Karen, open up." "Dad." Mom was standing beside him when I looked through the peephole. I opened the door, but kept myself planted in the doorway. Mom immediately stepped forward. "We need to fix this before it gets serious." "It already is serious." "Then let us inside." "No." Both of them froze. I had never denied my parents' entry before. Dad lowered his voice. "Ashley could lose an important career opportunity because of this. Do you understand that?" I shifted carefully because my rib still hurt. "Do either of you know what sleeping with a fractured rib feels like?" Neither answered. Mom looked away first. Then she said, "Nobody is saying you weren't hurt. We're asking you to clarify that everybody was emotional." "Clarify what?" "That it wasn't exactly the way it sounded." I stared at her. "You mean lie?" Dad's jaw tightened. "Stop using that word." "I have medical documentation. I told the hospital what happened that night, and I saved your messages." Mom's face changed. "You saved them?" "Every one." The silence that followed was different. Taking my phone hadn't protected Ashley. Mom's message telling me to claim I slipped was now preserved beside the version she'd been telling our relatives. And Ashley had another problem. Because the assault matter was unresolved, it had to be disclosed during a professional background review process connected to the opportunity she'd been pursuing. Mom blamed me immediately. "You knew this could happen." "I didn't break her future. I told the truth about what she did." Dad stepped closer. "If you don't make this disappear, Don't expect to still be part of this family." I looked directly at him. "If protecting Ashley requires abandoning me, then you've already made that choice." Mom opened her mouth. Before she could answer, my phone rang. I looked at the caller information, then at my parents. It was the investigator handling the assault report. Mom whispered, "Karen." I answered, "Hello," and left both of them standing outside my door. I cooperated fully with the investigation. And once everything was placed in order, my family's version started collapsing under its own weight. The argument had escalated. I had tried to disengage. Ashley had shoved me during the confrontation, sending me into the furniture hard enough to fracture my rib and cut my head. I had reached for my phone to call the police. Mom had taken it. Then my parents had tried to convince me to describe what happened as an accident. None of that depended solely on my memory anymore. The hospital had documented my injury and my account that same night. The earlier messages from Ashley showed how hostile things had become before the fight. And afterward, Mom had written, "Please tell the hospital you slipped." Dad had put his priority in writing too. Ashley has applications pending. They thought taking my phone would keep the situation inside the family. Instead, their own messages helped preserve exactly what they wanted hidden. There was no elaborate revenge plan. I didn't destroy Ashley's future behind her back. I simply stopped lying for her. When Ashley confronted me again, Mom and Dad were there. Her professional opportunity had been affected because the unresolved assault matter had become relevant during the background review process. She looked exhausted and furious. "You knew what this would cost me." I looked at Mom. "You remember what you told me while I was bleeding." Mom's eyes dropped. I repeated it anyway. "You told me calling for help would ruin her life." Then I turned toward Ashley. "But none of you cared what protecting her was doing to mine." "Karen," Mom's voice cracked. "I was trying to protect both of my daughters." "No." She stopped. "You took one daughter's phone while she was injured because you wanted to protect the daughter who hurt her. That's not protecting both of us." Mom started crying. Dad stared at the floor. Ashley crossed her arms. "So that's it? You're just going to let this happen?" That question told me she still didn't understand. "Ashley, I'm not letting something happen to you. You're dealing with something you did." For once, nobody had an answer ready. The legal process continued without the private family rescue Ashley had always been able to count on. Her professional opportunity moved beyond her reach while the matter remained unresolved. The family story changed too. Relatives who had criticized me eventually learned that Mom had minimized my fractured rib and pressured me to describe the injury as a fall. My cousin apologized first. Then my aunt called. "I didn't know you were actually injured like that," she said quietly. That was the problem. Nobody asked me. Some relatives apologized. Others simply stopped talking about it. I didn't demand public apologies. I didn't start exposing private messages in the family group chat. I didn't need everyone to choose my side. I just stopped covering for the people who had refused to protect me. Mom eventually returned my phone and tried to talk about getting the family back to normal. I handed her a reality she didn't want. There is no going back to normal. Karen, we're still your parents. And I'm still your daughter. That didn't stop you from choosing Ashley while I was bleeding. From then on, contact happened on my terms. If Mom tried to pressure me, I ended the conversation. If Dad blamed me for Ashley's consequences, I left. Ashley no longer had the comfort of knowing I would absorb whatever happened just because I was older. And my parents lost the daughter they had depended on to quietly clean up every family disaster. Months later, my rib healed. My relationship with Ashley didn't. We remained distant. I kept limited contact with my parents, and family gatherings became optional rather than obligations where I was expected to sacrifice my boundaries to keep everyone comfortable. The strangest change was also the simplest. I stopped asking myself whether protecting myself would upset somebody else. That night, my mother had looked at me bleeding on the floor and told me not to call for help because it might ruin Ashley's future. Eventually, I understood what none of them wanted me to understand. Protecting someone from the consequences of hurting me was never my responsibility.